Anime waifus. Every anime enjoyer and by extension gamers have at least one or a few. Whether you're old school, new school, or everything in between, you might have considered getting merch like a pillow or a figure for your preferred waifus or husbandos.
You're right! Good job!
How and why this is relevant, you might ask? Well, because the sole reason I have my first Figma figure was because of Rider, or Medusa from the Fate series. And since we have both of them here in the studio, instead of looking just one of them, let's have a little comparison between the two figures as someone who has animated with a number of figures at this scale. So this isn't just a review of both Figma Riders, this is a review of what it's like animating with both Figma Riders for an action sequence that is still underway as of writing this review. And even though the action sequence is nowhere finished yet, stay tuned till the end of this review for a little sneak peek of the action. But first, we need a little bit of context. The release of Figma number 69, nice, or Rider 1.0, is how I got into the Figma series even before the inception of this channel. And in 2022, Max Factory under the distribution of Good Smile Company released Figma Rider 2.0. Even if you don't have one or both figures, you can sort of tell which is the upgrade, if not at least an aesthetic difference. Box aside, Figma Rider 2.0 comes with a few accessories, including her faceplate, extra wrist joint, an assortment of hands, one sandwich bag, and an instructional document. The first thing that caught my attention is the glossy, striking purple accent on the figure. The main figure herself has more defining features that gives her a sense of depth from the clothing to the overall outline. In a way, Rider 2.0 is more true to life as opposed to the stylistic design of Rider 1.0. And if you ask me which one looks better, it all comes down to preference. If you like the nostalgic appearance from the visual novel game, Rider 1.0 definitely looks better for you. But if you prefer a modern update with RTX on, Rider 2.0 is that result. Appearance aside, Rider 2.0 was Mac Factory's attempt to address many of Rider 1.0's shortcomings. In that regard, Rider 2.0 is objectively an upgrade, from the figure's engineering to her most obvious issue from the previous iteration. But we'll get to that in a moment. Oh, and if you're curious about both of their heights, this is the difference with the same pose. And as much as I personally love the character design on her own, it is important for an animator to look at the character design and decipher its origin to better animate them and instill life upon them. If you don't already know, Figma Rider's origin is that of the Gorgons from Greek mythology. And not just any Gorgons. She is Medusa. And Medusa is usually represented as a winged female creature having a head consisting of snake. And in Fate Grand Order, well, Medusa is just that. But her Rider class variant have traces of her true origin. One of these traces can be seen in her iconic and unusual weapon as a Rider class servant. The stakes. Not that kind of stakes, but the kind with the pointy end, and the kind that Buffy used to kill the vampires with. As Medusa is synonymous with snakes, the two stakes that she comes with resembles Rider's fangs. Much like how venomous snakes has fangs that could immobilize and execute their prey, the stakes are Rider's fangs, to puncture her victim while the chain coils and ensnare any target that befalls upon her mystic gaze, a permanent reminder of her serpent-like nature. This unusual weapon of choice opens the imagination for an animator to use them more than just a tool to stab, but to entangle something or someone, or use it as a whip or something as innocent as a jump rope. And let's not forget this blindfold piece, which looks like a visor. It's a very simple piece that's very easy to attach to the faceplate. And by covering Rider's eyes and leave it to imagination, it transformed this basic faceplate into a more interesting version of her expression. And while you can do this for both Figma Rider, Rider 2.0 has almost everything great from the previous figure, and it isn't a drastic overhaul. And as someone who is a massive fan of the character, I really want to say this is a 10 out of 10 improvement. However, the reality is that it isn't, and I'm going to explain why. The notable differences between 1.0 and 2.0 is Rider's glossy purple accent, but especially her wrist joint and guard. On first glance, this looks great, but functionally it's detrimental to 2.0's wrist mobility. Unironically, you'll have more wrist movement on 1.0 than her upgraded counterpart. Fortunately though, you can rotate them to move it out of the way, but it's still a potential breaking hazard if you're not careful with them when posing or animating with her. And then there's the bleeding paint job on 2.0's neck onto the skin tone. This could be just my unit though. Personally, I prefer 1.0's neck choker. It's a separate component from the figure itself and is detachable. Maybe this is an uncommon issue with the bleeding paint on 2.0's neck, but the non-detachable design, in my opinion, is a slight downgrade. Now let's move on to what has improved since Rider 1.0. One of the major fixes 2.0 got is her head component. In 1.0, there is a clear divide of color profile at the back of her hair. And on 2.0, there are still small differences, not sure if it translates well on camera to screen, but it's more coherent and is addressed for the most part. Another issue they have addressed is this awkward curve on the flexible plastic on 1.0. Personally, I'm glad they solved this issue, especially at this price point. A major upgrade that Rider 2.0 got is the hip extension, which in the official GSC's page called it a drawer joint for creating action poses and crouching poses. On Rider 1.0, her short skirt is made out of flexible material for her leg mobility. While it is there, it's not all that great. On 2.0, also have the same material on her skirt, but instead of being one complete piece, it's now a separate component to accommodate for additional range of motion. And if you're particular with the quality of the chain, you'll find the chain from Rider 1.0's kit is more matte, which gives off that rugged aesthetic compared to 2.0's loose chain, which has more of a metallic chrome that reflects light in unexpected places. This shouldn't matter for most people, but it's something to consider if you care about lighting reflecting or in a filming environment. Personally, I think Figmas and figure like it isn't meant for stop motion, but it would be great if there are ways to position Rider's hair in a way that makes her hair appear floaty. It doesn't really matter if Figma Rider is just sitting or standing on a display shelf, but boy, I really wish there is an easier way to make her hair appear light and floaty. There were moments this makes or break the shot for me during filming, and unfortunately, this isn't few and far between. 2.0's next range of motion is pretty much similar to the previous version, as well as her shoulder and elbow. But when 2.0's arm is raised over her head, the hands will have a difficult time to contact one another if that's something that you want to do. Her upper torso has a minimal articulation point, and as mentioned earlier, 2.0's hip can be articulated quite well on her own, especially when pulled down, giving the legs that wider range of motion. And for her knees, this is as much as you can articulate them. 2.0's ankle is pretty much the same as 1.0. Unfortunately, she can point down her toes quite well, but is limited to the opposite direction, making a full squat difficult to pull off. Fortunately though, 2.0's toes can be articulated, which is great. Let's talk about balance, specifically if you're someone who prefers to pose a figure as is without a stand. Mainly because both Figma Rider's head component along with its appendages, i.e. her hair, will impose your preference to make her stand upright. It is back heavy, meaning that you'll have to lean her forward and find balance. What makes this potentially difficult is the fact that Rider is a tall figure, like Victoria's Secret model tall, which looks great and a welcome addition, but can be finicky to find balance without a stand or something to lean on. However, if you do decide to balance her on her stand, whether it be a stand that comes within the box or of your very own figure stand, you might find it difficult as it will be a tight fit, at least on the figure in the studio, which may require some modification to the figure herself or sanding down the peg that plugs into her back. This could just be the unit here in the studio, so your mileage may vary. There might be a small subset of you out there who's asking if you should get this figure if you already have Figma 69. I'd say if you're a massive fan of the series or Rider specifically, like me, Figma 538 is definitely worth, especially if you appreciate the upgrade. But if you're someone who enjoys collecting figures and posing them without a stand, you'll find it difficult to do that with Figma Rider 2.0. And if you enjoy animating, especially when animating with Figma Rider, you'll need a certain TLC when handling her with her flexible hair material. especially if you plan to utilize her chain. Figma figures are known to be screen-accurate works of art. Figma 69 and 538 from the visual novel and Heaven's Feel, respectively, are no exceptions. However, these two figures are made for form over function. They are great for a display piece and can pull off several dynamic poses. And in my opinion, the sculptor did a great job with Figma Rider. But after spending time animating with Figma Rider, I can tell you that she can be difficult to balance to stay upright. Her flexible hair will get in the way on some poses, and although she's beautifully proportioned, she's not easy to animate with, but she can also articulate very well and do this. In conclusion, waifu over 10. The reality is that although I have animated with a number of figures, I am still nervous animating with both Figma 69 and Figma 538. But I think you, the viewers and longtime subscriber of the channel, deserve to see her in action as much as I am a fan of Rider from the Fate series. And if you're new to the channel, first off, welcome to the channel. Normally the action sequence would be finished first before I make an animator's review, but since stop motion is a time-consuming process, and with Figma Rider's unusual weapon kit, I decided it would be best to finish this review first. I'm very excited to get this one done for you guys. And if you're considering supporting the channel and refueling my coffee to get this one done quicker, you can do so on the channel's Patreon page or links down in the description. If you are unable to, that's okay. I appreciate you for watching the videos on the channel. And if you want to be notified for when it's done, get subscribed with the notification bell. That's all for this review. Remember to leave a like on the video, as that will be super helpful to reach more people who are fans of Rider. And if you're looking for something to watch, on screen is something that YouTube thinks you'll like. That's all from me. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.